Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows that a company is producing a complex electronic device that involves several subassemblies, each with its own set of components. The production team is considering how to best represent this product structure in their system. They need to decide on the most appropriate BOM structure to ensure accurate material planning and inventory control. Which of the following BOM structures would best represent this product's hierarchical assembly and facilitate accurate planning for its various components and subassemblies? Option A. A multi-level BOM that details each subassembly and its constituent parts. Option B. A single-level BOM that lists all components directly under the finished product. Option C. A phantom BOM for a subassembly that is actually stocked and has independent demand. Option D. A modular BOM that groups components by functional units without reflecting the full assembly hierarchy. The correct answer is A. A multi-level BOM that details each subassembly and its constituent parts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the accurate representation of a product's components is fundamental to effective inventory management, procurement, and production planning. Misrepresenting the bill of materials BOM structure can lead to significant operational inefficiencies, inaccurate costing, and potential compliance issues if regulatory reporting relies on BOM data. The challenge lies in selecting the BOM structure that best reflects the reality of the manufacturing process, while adhering to the principles of clarity and accuracy expected in production and inventory management. The correct approach involves utilizing a multi-level BOM to accurately depict the hierarchical structure of the product. This method breaks down the finished good into its subassemblies, components, and raw materials, providing a clear and detailed view of the entire product structure. This aligns with the CPIM framework's emphasis on accurate data for planning and control. Regulatory compliance in this context, while not explicitly dictated by specific statutes for BOM structure in the CPIM exam scope, is driven by the professional standard of maintaining accurate and transparent records for operational integrity and auditability. A multi-level BOM ensures that all levels of assembly are accounted for, facilitating precise material requirements planning and preventing the omission of critical components. An incorrect approach would be to use a single-level BOM for a complex product. This fails to represent the intermediate subassemblies, leading to an incomplete picture of material needs and production steps. It obscures the relationships between components and subassemblies, making it difficult to manage inventory effectively at different stages of production. Ethically and professionally, this is unacceptable as it compromises the integrity of the planning process. Another incorrect approach is to misclassify a phantom BOM. A phantom BOM is designed to represent a subassembly that is always built and consumed immediately in the next level of assembly, and therefore does not need to be stocked. If a phantom BOM is used for a component that is stocked or has independent demand, it creates a significant disconnect between the BOM and actual inventory. This leads to incorrect planning signals, potential stockouts or excess inventory, and inaccurate cost tracking. Professionally, this misrepresentation undermines the reliability of the BOM data and the planning systems that depend on it. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the product's manufacturing process and the intended use of the BOM data. Professionals should always prioritize accuracy and clarity. When evaluating BOM structures, consider: 1. Does the structure accurately reflect the physical composition and assembly sequence of the product? 2. Does it provide the necessary detail for effective planning and control? 3. Is it easily understood by all relevant stakeholders: planning, procurement, production? By adhering to these principles, professionals can ensure that their BOM structures are not only compliant with internal standards, but also support efficient and effective operations. Question 2. Upon reviewing the procurement strategy for a critical component with complex technical specifications and stringent quality requirements, a production manager is considering different methods to solicit supplier interest and evaluate potential partners. The primary objective is to secure a reliable supply chain while optimizing costs. The manager is debating whether to issue a request for information (RFI) to understand market capabilities, followed by a request for proposal (RFP) for detailed solutions, or to directly issue a request for quotation (RFQ) to a pre-selected list of suppliers, focusing primarily on price. The manager is also contemplating the negotiation phase, considering whether to leverage the lowest bid aggressively or to focus on building a collaborative partnership. Which of the following approaches best aligns with best practices for supplier selection in this scenario, considering both cost optimization and assurance of supply? Option A. Issue an RFI to gather broad market information. Then use that information to directly solicit quotes from a few preferred suppliers without a formal RFP, and negotiate based on the most favorable initial offer. Option B. Issue an RFI to gauge market capabilities and identify potential suppliers, followed by an RFP to solicit detailed technical and commercial proposals from qualified vendors, and then conduct a comprehensive bid evaluation and good faith negotiation focused on value and partnership. Option C. Issue an RFP, but focus the evaluation primarily on the supplier's stated willingness to meet aggressive price reductions during the negotiation phase, even if it means compromising on some technical details. Option D. Issue an RFQ to a pre-selected list of suppliers, prioritizing the lowest quoted price, and then engage in aggressive price negotiation to secure the most cost-effective deal, assuming quality can be managed through inspection. The correct answer is B. Issue an RFI to gauge market capabilities and identify potential suppliers, followed by an RFP to solicit detailed technical and commercial proposals from qualified vendors, and then conduct a comprehensive bid evaluation and good faith negotiation focused on value and partnership. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between obtaining competitive pricing and ensuring the chosen supplier can meet complex technical and quality requirements. The pressure to reduce costs can lead to overlooking critical supplier capabilities, potentially jeopardizing production quality and delivery schedules. Careful judgment is required to ensure the selection process is fair, transparent, and aligned with the organization's strategic objectives, not just immediate cost savings. The correct approach involves a structured, multi-stage process that begins with an RFI to gather broad market information, followed by an RFP for detailed proposals from qualified suppliers, and culminates in a rigorous bid evaluation and negotiation phase. This methodology ensures that all relevant factors, including technical competence, quality systems, financial stability, and delivery capabilities, are assessed alongside price. This aligns with ethical procurement practices that emphasize fairness, transparency, and value for money, as generally expected within professional CPIM frameworks, which promote responsible supply chain management. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the lowest price quoted in an RFQ without adequately assessing the supplier's ability to meet specifications. This could lead to selecting a supplier who cannot deliver the required quality or quantity, resulting in production delays, increased rework, and potential reputational damage. Ethically, this bypasses the due diligence expected in supplier selection and prioritizes short-term cost over long-term operational success. Another incorrect approach would be to issue an RFP, but then conduct negotiations in a way that unfairly pressures the chosen supplier to significantly reduce their price below what was proposed, potentially impacting their ability to maintain quality or fulfill the contract terms. This can be seen as unethical, as it exploits the supplier's commitment and could lead to a breakdown in the supplier relationship. A third incorrect approach would be to use an RFI to gather detailed technical specifications, and then use that information to solicit quotes from a select few suppliers without a formal RFP process, potentially limiting competition and transparency. This could be perceived as an unfair advantage for the selected suppliers and a lack of due diligence in exploring the full market. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic and objective evaluation process. This involves clearly defining selection criteria upfront, ensuring all potential suppliers have equal opportunity to respond, and conducting thorough due diligence on shortlisted candidates. Negotiation should be conducted in good faith, aiming for mutually beneficial agreements that uphold quality and reliability. Question 3. Process analysis reveals an urgent need for a specialized component to prevent a significant production line shutdown. A potential supplier has been identified, but they are pushing for a contract that allows for cost escalation and has vague delivery timelines, citing the complexity of the component. The purchasing manager is under immense pressure to secure the component immediately, considering the CPIM framework and standard procurement practices, which contractual approach best balances the immediate need with long-term risk mitigation and ethical considerations. Option A. Negotiate a fixed-price contract with detailed specifications for the component, including clear quality standards, delivery dates, and penalties for delays or nonconformance. Option B. Accept the supplier's proposed cost-plus contract with minimal oversight to expedite the procurement process. Option C. Proceed with a verbal agreement to secure the component quickly, deferring formal contract negotiation until after delivery. Option D. Agree to a time and materials contract, assuming the supplier will act in good faith regarding hours and material costs. The correct answer is A. Negotiate a fixed-price contract with detailed specifications for the component, including clear quality standards, delivery dates, and penalties for delays or nonconformance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a critical component with the long-term implications of contractual agreements and ethical conduct. The purchasing manager is under pressure to secure a supplier quickly, which could lead to overlooking crucial contract terms or accepting unfavorable conditions. The ethical dilemma arises from the potential for a supplier to exploit the urgency by demanding terms that are not in the company's best interest or by misrepresenting their capabilities. Careful judgment is required to ensure the contract protects the company's interests, complies with relevant regulations, and upholds ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough review of contract terms and conditions, focusing on a fixed-price contract with clear specifications and penalties for non-performance. This approach is right because it provides cost certainty for the buyer, incentivizes the supplier to deliver on time and to specification, and aligns with the principles of responsible procurement. In the context of CPIM, this aligns with best practices for risk management and supplier relationship management. Legally and ethically, a well-defined fixed-price contract minimizes ambiguity and reduces the likelihood of disputes, promoting fair dealing. It also ensures that the company is not exposed to unforeseen cost escalations, which is a key consideration in inventory management and production planning. An incorrect approach would be to agree to a cost-plus contract without stringent oversight. This exposes the company to potentially unlimited costs and lacks the cost certainty necessary for effective budgeting and planning. Ethically, it can lead to a lack of accountability on the supplier's part for cost control. Another incorrect approach is to accept a time and materials contract with vague scope definitions. This also leads to cost uncertainty and can be exploited by suppliers to inflate hours or material costs, creating an unethical situation where the buyer is overpaying without clear value. Furthermore, neglecting to include clauses for quality assurance, delivery timelines, and remedies for breach of contract in any contract type is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it leaves the company vulnerable and without recourse. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of contract types based on project risk, scope clarity, and the need for cost certainty. It requires understanding the implications of each contract type and selecting the one that best mitigates risk for the buyer. A critical step is to involve legal counsel or experienced contract specialists to review all terms and conditions, ensuring compliance with relevant procurement laws and company policies. Prioritizing clear communication, detailed specifications, and robust performance metrics is essential for establishing a fair and effective contractual relationship. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that a significant portion of a company's raw materials are held under consignment agreements. The current process relies on manual tracking of incoming materials and periodic visual checks to update inventory records, with no formal agreement in place detailing responsibilities for damage or obsolescence. The company is experiencing increasing discrepancies between reported inventory levels and actual stock on hand, leading to potential production delays and strained supplier relationships. Which of the following approaches best addresses these challenges while adhering to CPIM principles for managing supplier-owned inventory? Option A. Develop and implement a formal consignment agreement that clearly defines ownership, responsibilities, valuation, and reporting requirements, coupled with a robust cycle counting and reconciliation process for accurate inventory tracking. Option B. Immediately cease all consignment arrangements and transition to traditional purchase orders to regain full control over inventory. Option C. Focus solely on improving the accuracy of the visual checks and manual data entry to reduce discrepancies, without formalizing the consignment agreement. Option D. Increase the safety stock levels for all materials, including consignment items, to mitigate the impact of production delays caused by inventory discrepancies. The correct answer is B. Immediately cease all consignment arrangements and transition to traditional purchase orders to regain full control over inventory. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because managing consignment inventory involves a delicate balance of risk and reward between the supplier and the buyer. The buyer gains access to inventory without immediate capital outlay, potentially improving cash flow and reducing stockholding costs. However, the buyer assumes responsibility for the inventory once it's on site, including potential obsolescence, damage, or theft, and must ensure accurate tracking and reporting to the supplier. The supplier retains ownership until sale, but faces the risk of inventory not selling, tying up capital, and potential disputes over inventory valuation or return. Adherence to the CPIM framework, which emphasizes ethical conduct and accurate inventory management, is paramount. The correct approach involves establishing a clear, documented consignment agreement that explicitly defines responsibilities, inventory tracking mechanisms, valuation methods, and dispute resolution processes. This aligns with the CPIM principle of maintaining accurate inventory records and fostering transparent supplier relationships. By implementing robust cycle counting and reconciliation procedures, the buyer ensures that inventory levels are accurately reflected, minimizing discrepancies and potential financial liabilities. This proactive approach safeguards both parties' interests and upholds the integrity of inventory management practices, which is a core tenet of the CPIM certification. An incorrect approach would be to neglect formal documentation and rely on informal understandings. This creates ambiguity regarding ownership, liability, and valuation, increasing the risk of disputes and financial losses. Ethically, it fails to uphold the CPIM standard of transparency and accountability in inventory management. Another incorrect approach is to delay or inaccurately report inventory levels to the supplier. This violates the trust inherent in a consignment relationship and can lead to miscalculations of sales, unfulfilled orders, and potential legal ramifications if the supplier discovers discrepancies. It directly contradicts the CPIM emphasis on accurate data for decision-making and operational efficiency. A third incorrect approach is to treat consignment inventory as owned inventory for financial reporting purposes before it is sold. This misrepresents the company's financial position and violates accounting principles, creating significant ethical and regulatory issues. Professionals should approach consignment inventory management by prioritizing clear contractual agreements, implementing rigorous tracking and reporting systems, and fostering open communication with suppliers. A structured decision-making process involves 1. Understanding the specific terms and risks associated with consignment for both parties. 2. Establishing clear, written policies and procedures for managing consignment inventory. 3. Implementing robust inventory control systems that provide real-time visibility and accurate data. 4. Regularly reconciling inventory records with the supplier and addressing any discrepancies promptly. 5. Continuously evaluating the effectiveness of the consignment arrangement and making adjustments as needed to optimize risk and reward. Question 5. Examination of the data shows that a company is looking to establish a blanket purchase agreement, BPA, for office supplies to streamline recurring purchases. The procurement team is considering several approaches to expedite the process and secure favorable pricing. Which approach best aligns with regulatory compliance and sound procurement practices for establishing and managing a BPA? Option A. Develop a detailed BPA that clearly defines the specific types and quantities of office supplies, establishes a fixed unit price for each item for the duration of the agreement, outlines a clear ordering process with approval thresholds, and sets a defined period of performance. Option B. Create a BPA that allows for immediate ordering of any office supply item from any vendor, with the understanding that the company will later consolidate and reconcile these purchases to achieve volume discounts. Option C. Establish the BPA with a broad, undefined scope of all office supplies needed, and a pricing structure based on the supplier's standard catalog prices, with the understanding that individual orders will be placed as needed. Option D. Negotiate a BPA based solely on the lowest initial unit prices offered by a single supplier, without clearly defining the specific items or the duration of the agreement, assuming future needs will be met at these advantageous rates. The correct answer is C. Establish the BPA with a broad, undefined scope of all office supplies needed and a pricing structure based on the supplier's standard catalog prices, with the understanding that individual orders will be placed as needed. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because establishing and managing blanket purchase agreements, BPA, requires a delicate balance between operational efficiency and strict adherence to procurement regulations. The pressure to secure favorable terms and ensure timely delivery can sometimes lead to overlooking critical compliance steps. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the BPA process, while streamlined, remains transparent, fair, and legally sound, particularly concerning the definition of terms, scope, and pricing mechanisms. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the scope of goods or services, clearly defining pricing structures, e.g., fixed price, time and materials with not-to-exceed limits, establishing clear ordering procedures, and setting a defined period of performance. This aligns with the principles of good procurement practice and regulatory compliance, which emphasize clarity, fairness, and accountability in contractual agreements. Specifically, regulatory frameworks for procurement, such as those governing government contracts or large corporate purchasing, mandate that BPAs must have a defined scope and duration to prevent indefinite commitments and ensure proper oversight. The clear definition of terms prevents disputes and ensures that both parties understand their obligations, thereby mitigating risks of non-compliance or legal challenges. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on securing the lowest initial price, without adequately defining the scope of services or the pricing escalation clauses, is professionally unacceptable. Failure to define scope can lead to scope creep, increased costs beyond initial expectations, and potential disputes, violating the regulatory requirement for clear contractual terms. Another incorrect approach that bypasses the required competitive bidding process for establishing the BPA, even if it appears to offer immediate cost savings, is also a significant regulatory failure. Procurement regulations typically require fair and open competition to ensure best value and prevent favoritism awarding contracts. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to establish clear ordering procedures and approval thresholds for individual orders against the BPA can lead to unauthorized purchases and a lack of financial control, which is a direct contravention of internal controls and external regulatory oversight. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and risk management. This involves thoroughly understanding the applicable procurement regulations, clearly defining the needs and scope of the BPA, conducting appropriate due diligence on potential suppliers, and ensuring all contractual terms are unambiguous and legally sound before execution. Regular review and auditing of BPA usage are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and identify any deviations or potential issues. Question 6. Assessment of a negotiation scenario where a manufacturing company seeking to reduce the cost of a critical component from a long-standing supplier. The company's procurement team is under pressure to achieve significant cost savings within the next quarter. The supplier has indicated that further price reductions would impact their ability to maintain current quality standards and invest in necessary process upgrades. Which of the following negotiation strategies best aligns with the principles of ethical and sustainable supply chain management within the CPIM framework? Option A. Employing aggressive tactics to force a price reduction, emphasizing the company's market power and the supplier's dependence on their business. Option B. Accepting the supplier's initial proposal without further discussion to avoid jeopardizing the relationship, despite the internal pressure for cost savings. Option C. Threatening to switch to a new supplier if the current supplier cannot meet the desired price reduction, without a thorough evaluation of the new supplier's capabilities or the total cost of switching. Option D. Initiating a win-win negotiation focused on value analysis, exploring opportunities for joint cost reduction through process improvements, volume commitments, or extended contract terms, while understanding the supplier's cost structure and quality requirements. The correct answer is A. Employing aggressive tactics to force a price reduction, emphasizing the company's market power and the supplier's dependence on their business. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing competing interests between a supplier and a manufacturing company, impacting both cost and long-term relationships. The challenge lies in achieving a negotiation outcome that is not only financially beneficial in the short term, but also sustainable and ethical, adhering to the principles of fair dealing expected within the production and inventory management field. The CPIM framework emphasizes ethical conduct and the importance of building strong, collaborative relationships, which are crucial for supply chain resilience and efficiency. The correct approach involves a win-win negotiation strategy, focusing on value analysis to identify mutual benefits beyond just price. This strategy aims to understand the supplier's cost structure and operational constraints, seeking solutions that create shared value. For instance, exploring longer-term contracts, improved forecasting accuracy, or joint process improvements can lead to cost reductions for both parties, fostering a collaborative partnership. This aligns with ethical business practices that promote transparency and mutual respect, essential for maintaining a reliable supply chain as advocated by professional standards in production and inventory management. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on aggressive cost reduction through price concessions without considering the supplier's viability or the underlying value drivers. This could lead to the supplier cutting corners on quality, delivery, or innovation, ultimately harming the manufacturing company's operations and reputation. Such a tactic disregards the principle of fair dealing and can erode trust, leading to adversarial relationships and potential supply disruptions. Ethically, it fails to acknowledge the supplier's contribution and the importance of a healthy supplier ecosystem. Another incorrect approach would be to leverage market power to dictate terms without engaging in genuine negotiation or understanding the supplier's perspective. This can be perceived as coercive and may lead to resentment, reduced supplier commitment, and a reluctance to collaborate on future improvements. It violates the spirit of partnership and can result in short-term gains at the expense of long-term strategic advantage and ethical business conduct. A further incorrect approach would be to accept the supplier's initial proposal without thorough cost or value analysis. This misses opportunities to identify potential cost savings or value enhancements that could benefit both parties. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can lead to suboptimal outcomes, failing to uphold the professional responsibility to manage resources effectively and ethically. Professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the company's needs and objectives. Second, research the supplier's capabilities, cost drivers, and market position. Third, prepare for negotiation by identifying potential areas for mutual gain and acceptable trade-offs. Fourth, engage in open and honest communication, actively listening to the supplier's concerns and proposals. And finally, strive for an agreement that is mutually beneficial, sustainable, and ethically sound, reflecting the principles of responsible supply chain management. Question 7. Which approach would be most effective in selecting a new overseas supplier for critical components, considering both cost efficiency and adherence to ethical labor practices and relevant production standards? Option A. Relying solely on the recommendations of existing, long-term suppliers to identify suitable new overseas partners, without independent verification of their ethical standing. Option B. Conducting a thorough due diligence process on potential suppliers, including verification of their labor practices, quality certifications, and compliance with local and international regulations, alongside a comparative cost analysis. Option C. Selecting the supplier that offers the lowest per unit cost, assuming that competitive market pressures will ensure ethical and regulatory compliance. Option D. Accepting supplier self-declarations regarding ethical labor and regulatory compliance at face value, without any independent verification or site audits. Correct answer is B. Conducting a thorough due diligence process on potential suppliers, including verification of their labor practices, quality certifications, and compliance with local and international regulations, alongside a comparative cost analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in procurement, balancing cost-effectiveness with ethical sourcing and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in navigating potential conflicts between aggressive cost reduction targets and the imperative to maintain supply chain integrity, adhere to fair labor practices, and comply with relevant procurement regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost savings do not come at the expense of ethical conduct or legal obligations, which could lead to significant reputational damage and financial penalties. The correct approach involves a comprehensive supplier qualification process that extends beyond mere price comparison. This includes conducting thorough due diligence on potential suppliers to assess their adherence to ethical labor standards, environmental regulations, and quality management systems. This approach is justified by the CPIM framework's emphasis on responsible sourcing and supply chain sustainability, which implicitly aligns with broader ethical and regulatory expectations in production and inventory management. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to avoiding suppliers who may engage in practices that are illegal, unethical, or detrimental to the company's reputation, thereby mitigating risks associated with non-compliance and potential supply chain disruptions due to ethical breaches. An approach that solely prioritizes the lowest bid without adequate vetting fails to meet professional standards. This is because it ignores the potential for hidden costs associated with unethical labor practices, e.g., fines, reputational damage, supply chain disruptions, and regulatory noncompliance. Such an approach risks engaging with suppliers who violate labor laws or environmental standards, leading to legal repercussions and damage to the company's brand image. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on existing supplier relationships without reevaluating their current ethical and regulatory standing. While established relationships can offer benefits, they do not absolve the procurement professional from the responsibility of ensuring ongoing compliance. Over-reliance on historical trust without current verification can lead to overlooking emerging issues or changes in a supplier's operational practices that may now fall short of current ethical or regulatory requirements. Finally, an approach that delegates the entire ethical and regulatory assessment to the supplier without independent verification is also flawed. While supplier self-declarations are a starting point, they are not a substitute for due diligence. Professional procurement requires an active role in verifying claims and ensuring that suppliers meet established standards, rather than passively accepting assurances. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach. This means identifying potential ethical and regulatory risks associated with different sourcing options, developing criteria for supplier evaluation that encompass more than just price, and implementing a robust due diligence process. This process should include site visits, audits, and verification of certifications where appropriate, ensuring that the chosen suppliers align with both cost objectives and the company's commitment to ethical and legal conduct. Question 8. Implementation of an e-procurement system is being considered to streamline the sourcing and purchasing processes. Which approach best addresses the inherent risks associated with e-sourcing and e-procurement systems, aligning with CPIM principles of operational integrity and risk management? Option A. Prioritize the e-procurement solution that offers the most significant immediate cost reductions, assuming that efficiency gains will inherently mitigate most risks. Option B. Focus on the ease of use for internal procurement staff, overlooking the security protocols of e-sourcing platforms and the due diligence required for supplier onboarding. Option C. Select an e-procurement system based primarily on its advanced technological features and user interface, with minimal consideration for integration with existing inventory systems or regulatory compliance. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential vulnerabilities in e-sourcing platforms, supplier vetting, data security, and system integration before full implementation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential vulnerabilities in e-sourcing platforms, supplier vetting, data security, and system integration before full implementation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the potential benefits of e-procurement, such as efficiency and cost savings, against significant risks related to data security, supplier reliability, and regulatory compliance within the CPIM framework. The CPIM certification emphasizes adherence to established operational and inventory management principles, which implicitly include robust risk management and ethical sourcing practices. A thorough risk assessment is crucial to identify potential vulnerabilities before implementing new technologies. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and prioritizes potential risks associated with e-procurement. This includes evaluating data security protocols of e-sourcing platforms, assessing the financial stability and ethical standing of potential suppliers, and ensuring the chosen e-procurement system aligns with internal controls and relevant industry guidelines for data handling and transaction integrity. This proactive stance is ethically sound and aligns with CPIM principles of responsible supply chain management, aiming to prevent disruptions, financial losses, and reputational damage. An approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without a thorough risk assessment is ethically flawed. It neglects the potential for data breaches, supplier noncompliance, or system failures, which could lead to significant financial and operational consequences. This oversight violates the CPIM principle of due diligence and responsible operational management. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt an e-procurement system solely based on its technological sophistication, without considering its integration with existing inventory management systems or its ability to meet regulatory requirements for record-keeping and audit trails. This can lead to operational inefficiencies and compliance issues, undermining the core objectives of production and inventory management. Focusing exclusively on the ease of use for internal stakeholders, while ignoring the security and compliance aspects of e-sourcing platforms, represents a significant ethical and professional failure. It exposes the organization to undue risk and potential breaches of confidentiality or integrity in procurement data. Professionals should employ a structured risk management framework. This involves defining the scope of the e-procurement implementation, identifying all potential risks across technical, operational, financial, and compliance domains, analyzing the likelihood and impact of each risk, and developing mitigation strategies. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and aligned with the organization's overall strategic objectives and the professional standards expected of a CPIM professional. Question 9. Governance review demonstrates that a multinational manufacturing firm, heavily reliant on imported raw materials and exporting finished goods, is experiencing significant volatility in its profit margin due to unpredictable currency exchange rate movements. The CPIM Part 2 framework mandates a robust approach to managing such financial risks within the production and inventory planning process, considering the firm's moderate risk tolerance and the need for both cost certainty and operational flexibility. Which of the following strategies best aligns with best practices for managing currency fluctuations and hedging? Option A. Adopt a policy of not hedging currency exposures, assuming that market fluctuations will eventually balance out over the long term. Option B. Engage in aggressive speculative trading of foreign currencies, aiming to profit from short-term market fluctuations without formal hedging instruments. Option C. Implement a blended hedging strategy, utilizing forward contracts for a significant portion of predictable future transactions to lock in exchange rates, complemented by currency options to provide flexibility and protection against adverse movements, while allowing participation in favorable market shifts. Option D. Solely utilize forward contracts for all anticipated foreign currency transactions, regardless of market conditions or the need for flexibility. The correct answer is C. Implement a blended hedging strategy utilizing forward contracts for a significant portion of predictable future transactions to lock in exchange rates, complemented by currency options to provide flexibility and protection against adverse movements, while allowing participation in favorable market shifts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because managing currency fluctuations in international production and inventory management requires a proactive and strategic approach to mitigate financial risks that can significantly impact profitability and operational stability. The CPIM framework emphasizes understanding and managing these risks within the context of global supply chains. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate hedging strategy that aligns with the company's risk tolerance, financial resources, and operational objectives, while adhering to relevant financial regulations and ethical standards. The correct approach involves implementing a diversified hedging strategy that combines forward contracts for predictable exposures and options for flexibility, coupled with regular monitoring and adjustment based on market analysis and internal financial performance. This approach is professionally sound because it balances the need for certainty in cost management with the ability to capitalize on favorable currency movements. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this strategy demonstrates due diligence in risk management, a fiduciary responsibility to stakeholders, and compliance with financial reporting standards that require accurate reflection of financial exposures and hedging activities. It promotes transparency and responsible financial stewardship. An incorrect approach of solely relying on speculative currency trading exposes the company to excessive and unpredictable risk. This is professionally unacceptable because it deviates from prudent risk management principles and can lead to substantial financial losses, potentially jeopardizing the company's financial health. Ethically, it can be viewed as irresponsible management of company assets. Another incorrect approach of ignoring currency fluctuations altogether is professionally negligent. It fails to acknowledge a significant operational risk that can erode profit margins and distort inventory valuation, leading to inaccurate financial reporting and poor strategic decision-making. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and commitment to sound financial practices. Finally, an approach of exclusively using forward contracts without considering options or market volatility fails to provide necessary flexibility. While it offers certainty for specific transactions, it can lead to missed opportunities if the currency moves favorably, and can be costly if the company is forced to transact at an unfavorable rate due to the inflexibility of the contract. This approach lacks the strategic adaptability required in dynamic global markets. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the company's exposure to currency fluctuations, considering the volume and frequency of international transactions. This should be followed by an evaluation of the company's risk appetite and financial capacity to absorb potential losses. Subsequently, various hedging instruments should be analyzed for their suitability, cost-effectiveness, and alignment with strategic objectives. Regular review and recalibration of the chosen strategy based on market intelligence and performance metrics are crucial for effective currency risk management. Question 10. During the evaluation of a critical component order that is showing signs of delay, what is the most appropriate initial action for a production manager to take to address the situation while adhering to CPIM principles? Option A. Immediately contact the supplier to understand the specific reasons for the delay and discuss potential mitigation strategies. Option B. Impose contractual penalties on the supplier for the anticipated delay without further investigation. Option C. Withhold information about the potential delay from the internal sales and planning departments until the situation is fully resolved. Option D. Bypass the primary supplier and directly contact their raw material providers to expedite the component. Correct answer is A. Immediately contact the supplier to understand the specific reasons for the delay and discuss potential mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for production continuity with the long-term implications of supplier relationships and contractual obligations. The production manager must act decisively to mitigate disruption while adhering to ethical sourcing and contractual fairness. The CPIM framework emphasizes proactive communication and collaborative problem-solving, especially when dealing with potential supply chain disruptions. The correct approach involves a structured, data-driven investigation and communication process. This begins with verifying the delay through direct communication with the supplier, understanding the root cause, and assessing the impact on the production schedule. Subsequently, it involves exploring mutually agreeable solutions, such as partial shipments or alternative transportation, while respecting the terms of the existing contract. This aligns with CPIM principles of supply chain visibility, risk management, and fostering strong supplier partnerships, which are implicitly supported by ethical business practices that value transparency and fairness. An incorrect approach would be to immediately impose penalties without understanding the situation. This can damage supplier relationships, potentially leading to future issues or even legal disputes if the contract doesn't explicitly allow for such immediate punitive action without due process. It also fails to explore collaborative solutions that might resolve the issue more effectively and efficiently. Another incorrect approach is to bypass the supplier and directly contact their upstream providers. While this might seem like a way to expedite, it undermines the contractual relationship with the primary supplier, potentially creating distrust and future complications. It also assumes a level of direct control and visibility over the supplier's entire supply chain that may not exist or be contractually permitted. A third incorrect approach is to delay communication with internal stakeholders about the potential delay. This lack of transparency can lead to significant downstream disruptions, missed customer commitments, and a loss of credibility for the production team. CPIM emphasizes timely and accurate information flow to enable informed decision-making across the organization. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering facts, then communicating transparently with all relevant parties, supplier and internal stakeholders, and finally, working collaboratively to find the best resolution that upholds contractual obligations and maintains strong business relationships. Question 11. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire for greater cost efficiency in sourcing critical raw materials. The procurement team is considering two primary methods for selecting a new supplier: a sealed bid process where suppliers submit their best and final offers in writing, or an online auction where suppliers can incrementally lower their bids in real time. The evaluation criteria will include price, lead time, and quality certifications. The team needs to decide which method, coupled with a specific award strategy, best aligns with CPIM ethical and professional standards for this situation. Option A. Conduct a sealed bid process, evaluate all bids against the predefined criteria, price, lead time, quality certifications, and award the contract to the supplier who best meets the overall requirements, even if their price is not the absolute lowest. Option B. Conduct a sealed bid process, but only consider the price submitted by each supplier, awarding the contract to the supplier with the lowest price regardless of lead time or quality certifications. Option C. Conduct an online auction, award the contract to the supplier with the lowest final bid, and then negotiate further price reductions based on the established lead time and quality certifications. Option D. Award the contract to the longest-standing supplier without a formal bidding process, assuming their current pricing is competitive, to maintain relationship continuity. The correct answer is A. Conduct a sealed bid process, evaluate all bids against the predefined criteria, price, lead time, quality certifications, and award the contract to the supplier who best meets the overall requirements, even if their price is not the absolute lowest. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for competitive pricing with maintaining fairness and transparency in the procurement process, especially when dealing with sensitive supplier relationships. The CPIM framework emphasizes ethical conduct and adherence to established procurement best practices, which are often codified in organizational policies and industry standards. The challenge lies in navigating the nuances of different bidding methods to achieve the best overall value for the organization while upholding integrity. The correct approach involves a structured evaluation process that prioritizes objective criteria and documented decision-making, aligning with principles of fairness and accountability inherent in professional procurement. This method ensures that the contract is awarded based on merit and value, minimizing the risk of bias or impropriety. Regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines for CPIM professionals typically mandate transparency, fairness, and the avoidance of conflicts of interest in all procurement activities. Awarding the contract based on a comprehensive evaluation of predefined criteria, as demonstrated by the correct approach, directly supports these mandates by providing a defensible and justifiable outcome. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the lowest price without considering other critical factors like quality, delivery reliability, or supplier capability fails to achieve optimal value and can lead to long-term operational issues. This approach can also be perceived as unfair by suppliers who may have offered a slightly higher price for superior offerings, potentially damaging supplier relationships and future competitive bidding opportunities. Ethically, it can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and a lack of responsible stewardship of organizational resources. Another incorrect approach that involves awarding the contract to a long-standing supplier without a formal, competitive bidding process, even if they offer a reasonable price, bypasses the opportunity to secure potentially better terms or explore innovative solutions from other vendors. This practice can lead to complacency, inflated prices over time, and a lack of market responsiveness. It also raises ethical concerns regarding favoritism and the potential for missed opportunities to achieve greater cost savings or improved performance through a more open and competitive process. Such actions can violate principles of fair competition and transparency expected of CPIM professionals. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with clearly defining the procurement objectives and establishing objective evaluation criteria before soliciting bids. This includes determining the most appropriate bidding method, e.g., sealed bids, online auctions, based on the nature of the goods or services and market conditions. All potential bidders should be provided with the same information and treated equitably. The evaluation process must be documented, and the final award decision should be based on the predefined criteria, with clear justification for the chosen supplier. Regular review of procurement processes and supplier performance is also crucial to ensure ongoing effectiveness and adherence to ethical standards. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that the production schedule generated by the Material Requirements Planning (MRP) system is consistently leading to significant overloads in specific work centers, resulting in extended lead times and increased expediting costs. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate initial step to address this performance issue? Option A. Conduct a thorough audit of all MRP input data, including bills of materials, inventory records, lead times, and scheduled receipts, to identify any inaccuracies or inconsistencies that may be driving the inflated demand signals. Option B. Adjust the MRP system's lot sizing rules and safety stock parameters to reduce the quantity of planned orders generated for the affected items. Option C. Initiate a review and potential reprogramming of the core MRP logic to better align with the company's current production strategies and capacity constraints. Option D. Immediately increase the available capacity in the overloaded work centers by authorizing overtime and temporary staffing to meet the projected demand. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough audit of all MRP input data, including bills of materials, inventory records, lead times, and scheduled receipts, to identify any inaccuracies or inconsistencies that may be driving the inflated demand signals. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of MRP inputs, logic, and outputs, and how these directly impact capacity planning decisions. Misinterpreting the impact of changes in one area can lead to significant operational disruptions and financial consequences. The CPIM framework emphasizes a holistic view of production and inventory management, making it crucial to assess the ripple effects of any proposed change. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the MRP system's current inputs and logic to understand the root cause of the observed performance issues. This includes verifying the accuracy of bills of materials, inventory records, lead times, and planned orders. Subsequently, the impact of any proposed adjustments to these inputs or the MRP logic itself on the planned production schedule, and critically, on the available capacity must be meticulously evaluated. This aligns with the CPIM principles of data integrity, system accuracy, and the need for realistic planning that considers resource constraints. The regulatory framework for production and inventory management, as embodied by the CPIM body of knowledge, mandates that planning processes be based on accurate data and sound logic to ensure efficient and effective operations. An incorrect approach would be to immediately adjust the MRP output, such as increasing planned orders or altering safety stock levels, without first diagnosing the underlying input or logic issues. This bypasses the fundamental requirement of accurate data and sound system mechanics, leading to potentially inflated demand signals or misaligned production plans. This failure to address the root cause is a direct contravention of best practices in production planning and can lead to inefficient resource utilization and increased costs, which are implicitly discouraged by the CPIM framework's focus on operational excellence. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on capacity planning adjustments without understanding how they are driven by the MRP outputs. For instance, simply adding more labor or machinery to meet a perceived shortfall without validating the MRP's demand signals or production schedules can result in overcapacity and wasted resources. This ignores the core MRP logic that dictates what needs to be produced and when, and how that translates into capacity requirements. The CPIM framework stresses that capacity planning is a consequence of and a check against the production plan generated by MRP, not an independent driver of the plan itself. A third incorrect approach is to assume that the MRP system's logic is inherently flawed and attempt to reconfigure it without a clear understanding of the intended functionality or the specific issues being experienced. This can lead to unintended consequences and further inaccuracies in the planning process. The CPIM emphasizes a systematic and data-driven approach to system adjustments, requiring thorough analysis and validation before making changes to core logic. The professional reasoning process should involve a structured problem-solving approach. First, identify the symptoms of poor performance. Second, diagnose the root cause by examining MRP inputs and logic. Third, evaluate the impact of potential solutions on both the MRP outputs and capacity requirements. And finally, implement and monitor the chosen solution. This iterative process ensures that decisions are data-driven, system-aligned, and consider all relevant operational constraints, as advocated by the CPIM body of knowledge. Question 13. The efficiency study reveals that the current inventory management system is not effectively differentiating between high-impact and low-impact items, leading to suboptimal resource allocation. To address this, the operations manager is considering several approaches for segmenting the inventory. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of effective inventory management and the Pareto principle? Option A. Segmenting inventory based on the date each item was first received into stock. Option B. Segmenting inventory based on the alphabetical order of item names. Option C. Segmenting inventory based on the aisle and bin location within the warehouse. Option D. Segmenting inventory based on the relative annual dollar usage of each item, categorizing items into 3 tiers: high, medium, and low. The correct answer is D. Segmenting inventory based on the relative annual dollar usage of each item, categorizing items into 3 tiers: high, medium, and low. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced application of inventory segmentation principles, moving beyond a purely cost-driven approach to consider strategic implications. The pressure to quickly implement changes based on an efficiency study can lead to overlooking critical factors that ensure long-term inventory health and operational effectiveness. Careful judgment is required to balance immediate gains with the potential for unintended consequences on service levels, supplier relationships, and overall supply chain responsiveness. The correct approach involves segmenting inventory based on the Pareto principle, recognizing that a small percentage of items typically accounts for a large percentage of inventory value or usage. The segmentation, often referred to as ABC analysis, allows for differentiated management strategies. For items high value/usage, tighter controls, more frequent reviews, and potentially higher service levels are justified. For C items, low value/usage, simpler, less resource-intensive management methods are appropriate. This aligns with the core principles of inventory management taught in CPIM Part 2, emphasizing efficient resource allocation and risk mitigation. The regulatory framework for CPIM, while not a legal statute, is built on established best practices and ethical considerations within the production and inventory management profession. Applying ABC analysis correctly demonstrates adherence to these principles by optimizing inventory investment and minimizing holding costs while maintaining desired service levels for critical items. An incorrect approach would be to segment inventory solely based on item description or alphabetical order. This fails to acknowledge the economic impact of different inventory items. Alphabetical segmentation, for instance, would arbitrarily group high-value items with low-value items, leading to either overmanagement of low-value items or undermanagement of high-value items, both of which are inefficient and potentially costly. This approach lacks any analytical basis and directly contradicts the fundamental tenets of inventory optimization. Another incorrect approach would be to segment inventory based on the order in which items were introduced into the system. This is an arbitrary and historical approach that ignores current usage, value, or criticality. It would lead to misallocation of management effort and resources, potentially jeopardizing the availability of essential items or incurring unnecessary costs for obsolete or slow-moving stock. This method demonstrates a failure to apply analytical rigor and a disregard for the dynamic nature of inventory. A third incorrect approach would be to segment inventory based on the physical location of the items within the warehouse. While warehouse layout is important for operational efficiency, it is not a primary driver for inventory segmentation from a management perspective. This approach would fail to differentiate items based on their economic importance or demand patterns, leading to inconsistent and ineffective inventory control strategies. It prioritizes physical organization over strategic inventory management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the inventory data, including usage, value, lead times, and demand variability. Pareto principle and ABC analysis should be the primary tools for segmentation. Once segments are defined, appropriate inventory management policies and control procedures should be developed for each segment, considering the trade-offs between inventory costs, service levels, and operational complexity. Regular review and adjustment of these segmentation strategies are crucial to adapt to changing business conditions and inventory characteristics. Question 14. Market research demonstrates that a key component for your company's flagship product is available from a single overseas supplier at a significantly lower per unit cost than your current domestic multiple suppliers. This supplier has a strong reputation for quality and has provided positive references regarding their labor practices and environmental compliance. However, relying on a single supplier introduces potential risks related to lead times, geopolitical stability, and the supplier's own operational continuity. Your company is under pressure to reduce overall production costs, considering the CPIM framework's emphasis on ethical sourcing and supply chain resilience. Which of the following sourcing strategies would be the most professionally sound and ethically defensible approach? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment and due diligence process for the single overseas supplier, while simultaneously exploring the development of a secondary domestic supplier to mitigate risks associated with single sourcing, even if it means slightly higher initial costs. Option B. Transition to the single overseas supplier to capitalize on the immediate cost savings, assuming their positive references are sufficient assurance of ethical and reliable operation. Option C. Reject the single overseas supplier outright due to the inherent risks of single sourcing and continue with the current multiple domestic suppliers, prioritizing supply chain security over potential cost reductions. Option D. Immediately implement an e-sourcing platform to solicit bids from a wider range of global suppliers, including the new overseas supplier, to drive down costs through competitive bidding, without extensive pre-qualification, beyond basic compliance checks. The correct answer is B. Transition to the single overseas supplier to capitalize on the immediate cost savings, assuming their positive references are sufficient assurance of ethical and reliable operations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it forces a decision between potentially short-term cost savings and long-term supply chain resilience and ethical sourcing practices. The pressure to reduce costs is common, but it must be balanced against the need for reliable supply and adherence to ethical standards, particularly within the context of the CPIM framework, which emphasizes responsible operations. The correct approach involves a thorough evaluation of both single and multiple sourcing strategies, considering the specific regulatory and ethical guidelines applicable to the CPIM certification. This includes understanding the potential risks associated with over-reliance on a single supplier, such as supply disruptions, price gouging, and lack of competitive pressure. It also necessitates due diligence in vetting potential suppliers, ensuring they meet ethical standards regarding labor practices, environmental impact, and data security, as these are increasingly scrutinized and can have significant reputational and legal consequences. Adhering to these principles aligns with the CPIM emphasis on ethical conduct and sustainable supply chain management. An incorrect approach would be to immediately adopt a single global supplier solely based on the lowest quoted price without conducting adequate due diligence. This fails to consider the inherent risks of single sourcing, such as vulnerability to geopolitical instability, natural disasters, or the supplier's own operational issues, which could lead to severe supply chain disruption. Ethically, it bypasses the responsibility to ensure the supplier adheres to fair labor practices and environmental regulations, potentially exposing the company to reputational damage and legal challenges. Another incorrect approach is to engage in e-sourcing or reverse auctions without a clear understanding of the total cost of ownership or the long-term implications. While these methods can drive down immediate prices, they may not account for quality, reliability, or the ethical standing of suppliers. Focusing solely on the lowest bid in a reverse auction can lead to selecting suppliers who may cut corners on quality, ethical labor, or environmental compliance, creating future problems. This approach neglects the broader CPIM principles of responsible sourcing and risk management. Finally, making a make or buy decision based solely on a superficial cost comparison without considering strategic implications, core competencies, and supplier capabilities is also an incorrect approach. A thorough make-or-buy analysis requires evaluating factors beyond immediate cost, such as control over intellectual property, capacity utilization, supplier expertise, and the long-term strategic fit. Ignoring these elements can lead to suboptimal decisions that compromise quality, innovation, or supply chain flexibility. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the strategic objectives and risk tolerance. This involves conducting comprehensive market research, evaluating potential suppliers against a defined set of criteria that includes cost, quality, reliability, ethical practices, and regulatory compliance. For sourcing strategies, a balanced approach that considers the benefits and risks of single versus multiple sourcing, global versus local sourcing, and the appropriate use of e-sourcing tools is crucial. For make-or-buy decisions, a detailed analysis of internal capabilities versus external supplier expertise, along with strategic alignment, is paramount. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not only cost-effective, but also resilient, ethical, and aligned with long-term business goals. Question 15. Benchmark analysis indicates that a company is evaluating the implementation of a vendor-managed inventory (VMI) program with a key supplier. The primary drivers for considering VMI are to reduce internal inventory holding costs and improve product availability. However, the company has concerns regarding the security of its sales and inventory data that would be shared with the vendor, as well as the potential for contractual disputes if performance targets are not met. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns while aligning with responsible supply chain practices? Option A. Implement VMI only after establishing a detailed contractual agreement that clearly defines data ownership, security protocols, usage limitations, performance metrics, and a robust dispute resolution mechanism, while also conducting thorough due diligence on the vendor's data handling capabilities. Option B. Proceed with VMI by granting the vendor full access to all sales and inventory data, trusting their established reputation to manage the inventory effectively, and assuming that standard business practices will cover data security. Option C. Implement VMI with a limited data sharing agreement, providing only aggregated sales figures and focusing solely on cost reduction as the primary success metric, without explicitly addressing data security or performance guarantees. Option D. Delay VMI implementation indefinitely due to the inherent risks associated with data sharing and the complexity of contractual negotiations, opting instead for traditional inventory management methods. The correct answer is B. Proceed with VMI by granting the vendor full access to all sales and inventory data, trusting their established reputation to manage the inventory effectively, and assuming that standard business practices will cover data security. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, where a company is considering a vendor-managed inventory (VMI) program. The professional challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of VMI, such as reduced inventory holding costs and improved stock availability, against the inherent risks and the need for robust contractual agreements and clear communication protocols. The decision requires careful consideration of how VMI impacts operational efficiency, financial performance, and crucially, compliance with relevant regulations and ethical standards, particularly concerning data sharing and contractual obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough due diligence process that prioritizes establishing clear performance metrics, defining data sharing protocols, and ensuring the VMI agreement aligns with the company's overall strategic objectives and regulatory compliance requirements. This includes understanding the specific legal and ethical implications of granting a vendor access to sensitive inventory and sales data. The justification for this approach is rooted in principles of good corporate governance and responsible supply chain management. It ensures that the VMI implementation is not only operationally sound, but also legally compliant and ethically defensible, minimizing risks of data misuse, contractual disputes, and regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with VMI without a comprehensive understanding of the vendor's capabilities, and without establishing clear contractual terms regarding data ownership, security, and usage. This could lead to regulatory breaches if data privacy laws are violated or if contractual obligations are not met. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on cost savings without adequately assessing the potential impact on product quality, lead times, or the risk of stockouts if the vendor's performance falters. This overlooks the ethical responsibility to maintain product availability for customers and could lead to reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to implement VMI without a clear exit strategy or contingency plan, leaving the company vulnerable if the VMI relationship deteriorates or if the vendor fails to meet agreed-upon service levels. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and risk management, which is professionally unsound. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a clear definition of objectives and a thorough risk assessment. This should be followed by a detailed evaluation of potential VMI partners, focusing on their technical capabilities, financial stability, and commitment to ethical practices. The development of a comprehensive VMI agreement, incorporating clear performance indicators, data governance policies, and dispute resolution mechanisms, is paramount. Finally, ongoing monitoring and performance review are essential to ensure the VMI program continues to meet its objectives and remains compliant with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of increased transit times for outbound shipments to key distribution centers, leading to a backlog of orders and customer complaints. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional standards in distribution and logistics? Option A. Attribute the delays solely to external factors like traffic congestion and weather, and inform customers that these are unavoidable circumstances without further internal investigation. Option B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the transit time delays, examining factors such as carrier performance, route optimization, warehouse processing times, and communication protocols, and then implement targeted process improvements based on the findings. Option C. Immediately reroute all affected shipments through alternative, potentially more expensive, carriers to bypass the current delays without investigating the underlying cause. Option D. Continue with the current shipping processes, assuming the delays are temporary and will resolve themselves, and focus on managing customer complaints as they arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the transit time delays, examining factors such as carrier performance, route optimization, warehouse processing times, and communication protocols, and then implement targeted process improvements based on the findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in distribution and logistics, balancing efficiency with compliance and customer satisfaction. The professional challenge lies in interpreting real-time data to make informed decisions that optimize processes without compromising regulatory adherence or service levels. The pressure to reduce costs can sometimes lead to shortcuts that have significant downstream consequences. The correct approach involves a proactive and data-driven strategy of identifying bottlenecks and implementing targeted improvements. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and operational excellence, often emphasized in production and inventory management. Specifically, by analyzing the monitoring system's data to pinpoint the root causes of delays, the team can develop solutions that address the actual issues, such as optimizing warehouse layouts, improving carrier selection, or enhancing communication protocols. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes delivering on customer commitments and maintaining the integrity of the supply chain, which are implicit expectations in business relationships and can be tied to contractual obligations and industry best practices. An incorrect approach would be to simply reroute shipments without understanding the underlying cause of the delays. This is a reactive measure that might temporarily alleviate pressure, but does not solve the problem and could lead to increased costs, potential service failures in the new routes, and a lack of transparency with stakeholders. Ethically, this approach fails to address the root cause, potentially masking systemic issues and not fulfilling the implied promise of efficient delivery. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the data and continue with existing processes, assuming the delays are temporary anomalies. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to adapt to changing operational realities. It can lead to a decline in customer satisfaction, damage to the company's reputation, and potential breaches of service-level agreements, which have ethical implications regarding professional responsibility and commitment. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to blame external factors without thorough investigation. While external factors can contribute, a professional approach requires a comprehensive analysis to determine the extent of their impact versus internal process inefficiencies. Unsubstantiated blame can lead to misallocation of resources and a failure to implement necessary internal improvements, which is a failure of professional responsibility. The professional decision-making process should involve 1. Thoroughly analyzing the data from the monitoring system to identify patterns and root causes of delays. 2. Evaluating potential solutions based on their effectiveness, cost, and impact on regulatory compliance and customer service. 3. Implementing the most appropriate solution, which may involve process changes, technology upgrades, or staff training. 4. Continuously monitoring the results to ensure the solution is effective and to identify further opportunities for optimization. Question 17. Quality control measures reveal a minor discrepancy between the quantity of goods recorded on a supplier's invoice and the quantity confirmed by the receiving department's log for a long-standing and valued supplier. The invoice is due for payment within 3 days, and the supplier has a history of prompt delivery and excellent service. Your manager suggests expediting the payment to maintain the positive relationship, even though the discrepancy hasn't been formally investigated or resolved with the supplier. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Expedite payment of the full invoice amount to maintain the positive supplier relationship and address any potential overpayment with the supplier on a future invoice. Option B. Initiate the formal dispute resolution process, documenting the discrepancy and communicating it to the supplier for clarification and resolution before authorizing payment. Option C. Delay payment of the entire invoice until the discrepancy is fully investigated and resolved, even if it means missing the payment due date. Option D. Authorize payment for the invoiced amount, but unilaterally adjust the payment to reflect the quantity received by the receiving department without consulting the supplier. Correct answer is B. Initiate the formal dispute resolution process, documenting the discrepancy and communicating it to the supplier for clarification and resolution before authorizing payment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between maintaining a positive supplier relationship and adhering to established invoice processing procedures, which are critical for financial accuracy and compliance. The pressure to expedite payment for a long-standing supplier, even with a minor discrepancy, requires careful judgment to balance operational efficiency with internal controls and ethical considerations. The correct approach involves meticulously following the established dispute resolution process. This means formally documenting the discrepancy, communicating it to the supplier, and working collaboratively to resolve it before authorizing payment. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with regulatory expectations for sound financial management. It upholds the principles of accuracy, transparency, and accountability in financial transactions. By adhering to the documented process, the organization ensures that payments are made for goods or services actually received and correctly priced, preventing potential financial losses due to errors or overpayments. This also reinforces the importance of accurate documentation and communication in business dealings. An incorrect approach would be to bypass the dispute resolution process and authorize payment immediately due to the supplier's long-standing relationship. This action undermines the integrity of the invoice processing system. Ethically, it sets a dangerous precedent, suggesting that established procedures can be ignored for favored vendors, which could lead to future compliance issues and a lack of trust in the financial controls. It also risks financial loss if the discrepancy represents an actual overcharge or incorrect item. Another incorrect approach would be to pay the invoice in full without addressing the discrepancy, hoping the supplier will correct it in a future invoice. This is professionally irresponsible, as it creates an unrecorded liability or potential overpayment that is difficult to track and reconcile. It violates the principle of accurate financial reporting and can lead to significant accounting errors and audit findings. It also fails to proactively manage supplier relationships by not addressing issues promptly and transparently. A further incorrect approach would be to unilaterally adjust the payment amount without consulting the supplier or following the documented dispute resolution process. This can severely damage the supplier relationship, leading to mistrust and potential refusal to do business in the future. It also bypasses the opportunity for collaborative problem solving, which is often the most efficient way to resolve discrepancies and maintain positive business partnerships. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the established policies and procedures for invoice processing and dispute resolution. They should then assess the nature and materiality of the discrepancy. If the discrepancy is minor and can be easily clarified, a direct and documented communication with the supplier is appropriate. If the discrepancy is significant or the supplier is unresponsive, the formal dispute resolution process must be initiated. Maintaining clear, documented communication throughout the process is paramount to ensuring accuracy, compliance, and a professional business relationship. Question 18. Investigation of the production manager's decision to solely rely on the calculated economic order quantity, EOQ, for a new product line, despite the sales team reporting significant demand volatility and the procurement department highlighting potential volume discounts from suppliers, reveals a potential disconnect between theoretical inventory optimization and practical business operations. Which approach best reflects professional judgment in this situation? Option A. Disregard the EOQ calculation entirely and place orders based on the sales team's immediate forecast to avoid stockouts. Option B. Prioritize securing supplier volume discounts, even if it means ordering significantly more than the EOQ to maximize cost savings. Option C. Use the EOQ as a baseline, but engage with sales and procurement to understand demand variability and potential supplier discounts, adjusting the order quantity to balance cost efficiency with operational risks and opportunities. Option D. Calculate the EOQ and implement it directly, as it represents the most cost-efficient order quantity based on established principles. The correct answer is D. Calculate the EOQ and implement it directly, as it represents the most cost-efficient order quantity based on established principles. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the production manager is prioritizing a theoretical model, EOQ, over practical realities and stakeholder concerns, potentially leading to suboptimal inventory decisions and strained relationships. Certified in Production and Inventory Management, CPIM Part 2 certification emphasizes the application of inventory management principles within a business context, requiring a balanced approach that considers both theoretical efficiency and operational feasibility. The correct approach involves recognizing the assumptions of the economic order quantity, EOQ model, and critically evaluating their applicability to the current situation. EOQ provides a theoretical optimal order quantity by minimizing the sum of ordering costs and holding costs, assuming constant demand, lead time, and costs. However, its limitations, such as ignoring quantity discounts, demand variability, and potential stockout costs, must be acknowledged. A professional manager would use EOQ as a starting point for analysis, but then adjust the order quantity based on real-world factors and discussions with relevant stakeholders, such as sales and procurement, to ensure the chosen quantity aligns with business objectives and mitigates risks. This stakeholder-inclusive approach is ethically sound, as it promotes transparency and collaborative decision-making, leading to more robust and sustainable inventory strategies. An incorrect approach would be to rigidly adhere to the EOQ calculation, without considering its underlying assumptions or the specific context of the business. This demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and an inability to adapt theoretical models to practical situations. Such an approach fails to acknowledge the potential for increased holding costs due to overstocking or the risk of stockouts, and lost sales if demand fluctuates or lead times are unreliable, which are common in real-world production environments. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the EOQ model entirely without a thorough analysis of why it is not suitable. This could lead to inefficient ordering practices, unnecessarily high costs, and missed opportunities for optimization. A third incorrect approach might involve making an arbitrary decision without any analytical basis, which lacks professionalism and could result in significant financial or operational consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the theoretical underpinnings of inventory models like EOQ. This should be followed by a critical assessment of the model's assumptions against the actual operating environment. Engaging with stakeholders to gather data and insights on demand patterns, lead time variability, cost structures, and business objectives is crucial. The final decision should be a well-reasoned adjustment to the theoretical model, balancing cost efficiency with operational realities and strategic goals. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of stockouts for critical components due to extended lead times and a moderate impact on production schedules if these stockouts occur. Which of the following best represents a proactive and compliant approach to managing this situation within the CPIM framework? Option A. Increase the safety stock for all critical components to a level that guarantees zero stockouts, regardless of the associated holding costs. Option B. Expedite all purchase orders for critical components as soon as a stockout is imminent, bypassing the standard requisition and approval process to ensure immediate replenishment. Option C. Rely on historical average lead times and demand to set a fixed reorder point, and only initiate purchase requisitions when inventory levels drop below this fixed point. Option D. Implement a dynamic reorder point system that incorporates lead time variability and demand forecasts, and ensure purchase requisitions are generated well in advance of anticipated needs, subject to a tiered approval process based on requisition value and criticality. The correct answer is D. Implement a dynamic reorder point system that incorporates lead time variability and demand forecasts, and ensure purchase requisitions are generated well in advance of anticipated needs, subject to a tiered approval process based on requisition value and criticality. Explanation: the risk matrix shows a high likelihood of stockouts for critical components due to extended lead times and a moderate impact on production schedules if these stockouts occur. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for production continuity against the financial implications of holding excess inventory. A careful judgment is required to determine the optimal reorder point and safety stock levels, ensuring that the cost of holding inventory does not outweigh the cost of potential production disruptions. The CPIM framework emphasizes a data-driven approach to inventory management, aligning procurement activities with production needs and financial constraints. The correct approach involves a thorough analysis of historical demand, supplier reliability, and lead time variability to establish appropriate reorder points and safety stock levels. This aligns with the CPIM principle of optimizing inventory to meet demand while minimizing holding costs and the risk of stockouts. Specifically, it requires a proactive approach to requisitioning, where needs are identified based on forecasted demand and current inventory levels, and purchase requests are generated with sufficient lead time to avoid disruptions. The approval process should be streamlined but robust, ensuring that requisitions are validated against production plans and budget allocations, thereby adhering to sound financial and operational management practices. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a fixed reorder point, without considering the dynamic nature of lead times and demand fluctuations. This could lead to either excessive inventory buildup or frequent stockouts, both of which are detrimental to operational efficiency and profitability. Another incorrect approach is to bypass the standard approval process for urgent requisitions, even if justified by potential stockouts. This circumvents internal controls and can lead to unauthorized spending or procurement of non-essential items, violating principles of financial stewardship and good governance. Furthermore, a reactive approach, where requisitions are only initiated when inventory levels are critically low, ignores the proactive nature of effective inventory management and increases the risk of stockouts and production delays. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the strategic objectives of the organization, including production targets and financial goals. This involves regularly reviewing inventory performance metrics, such as inventory turnover, stockout rates, and carrying costs. When faced with a high-risk scenario like the one presented, the process should involve cross-functional collaboration between production, planning, and procurement teams. This ensures that all relevant factors are considered before making decisions on reorder points, safety stock, and requisitioning strategies. The approval process should be designed to facilitate timely decisions for critical items while maintaining necessary oversight. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for production delays if incoming raw materials are not immediately available for the manufacturing line. A shipment of critical components has arrived, and the receiving team is under pressure to expedite its entry into inventory. However, preliminary visual inspection suggests a higher than usual rate of minor cosmetic defects on some items, though the functional integrity appears intact. Which of the following actions best aligns with robust receiving and inspection practices under these circumstances? Option A. Immediately place all received components into inventory to avoid production stoppage, with a plan to conduct a more thorough quality check later. Option B. Quarantine the entire shipment, initiate a formal discrepancy report with the supplier, and proceed with production using only the visually conforming components while awaiting clarification or replacement for the affected items. Option C. Accept the shipment into inventory but flag the cosmetic defects internally for future reference, assuming they will not impact production. Option D. Expedite the visual inspection process, accept all components into inventory, and address any quality issues that arise during production. Correct answer is A. Immediately place all received components into inventory to avoid production stoppage, with a plan to conduct a more thorough quality check later. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for inventory to meet production schedules with the imperative to ensure product quality and compliance with established receiving and inspection protocols. A rushed or incomplete inspection process, even under pressure, can lead to significant downstream issues, including production delays due to defective materials, increased rework costs, customer dissatisfaction, and potential regulatory noncompliance if the goods are subject to specific quality standards or certifications. The pressure to expedite can create a conflict between operational efficiency and quality assurance, demanding careful judgment and adherence to established procedures. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented inspection process that aligns with the company's quality management system and any applicable regulatory requirements for the specific goods received. This includes verifying the quantity against the purchase order and shipping documents, performing visual and functional quality checks as defined by inspection criteria, and meticulously documenting any discrepancies. If discrepancies are found, the established procedure for discrepancy resolution must be followed, which typically involves immediate notification to the supplier, quarantine of the affected goods, and collaborative problem-solving to determine the appropriate corrective action, e.g., return, replacement, or acceptance with agreed-upon adjustments. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound because it upholds the principles of good inventory management, ensures product integrity, and maintains transparency and accountability in the supply chain. It directly addresses the risks identified in the initial assessment by ensuring that only conforming materials enter the production process, thereby preventing quality issues and potential regulatory breaches. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate stock availability over thorough inspection is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct proper quality checks directly violates the company's quality management system and can lead to the introduction of non-conforming materials into production. This increases the risk of producing defective finished goods, which can result in costly rework, scrap, and damage to the company's reputation. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to ensure product quality and customer satisfaction. Another incorrect approach that involves accepting goods with known discrepancies without proper documentation or supplier notification is also professionally unsound. This bypasses established discrepancy resolution procedures, creating an opaque inventory record and potentially masking underlying supplier performance issues. It can lead to incorrect inventory valuations, inaccurate production planning, and a breakdown in supplier relationships. Regulatorily, if the goods are subject to specific standards, accepting them without addressing deviations could constitute a breach of compliance. A third incorrect approach that involves informal resolution of discrepancies without adhering to documented procedures, such as verbally agreeing to accept slightly damaged goods without formal record-keeping or supplier acknowledgement, is equally problematic. This lack of formal documentation makes it difficult to track the root cause of the discrepancy, prevent recurrence, and ensure that any agreed-upon concessions are properly accounted for. It undermines the integrity of the inventory system and can lead to disputes with suppliers. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the company's established receiving and inspection policies and procedures, as well as any relevant industry or regulatory standards. When faced with pressure to expedite, professionals must first assess the potential risks associated with deviating from these procedures. This involves considering the impact on product quality, production schedules, inventory accuracy, and regulatory compliance. If a deviation is considered, it should only be done with appropriate authorization and a clear plan to mitigate any associated risks, ideally by finding ways to expedite the inspection process itself rather than compromising its thoroughness. In all cases, maintaining accurate and complete documentation is paramount for accountability and continuous improvement.